Folks, welcome to the Daily Politics. Jeremy Corbyn kicks off Labour's election campaign, promising to take on what he calls the cosy cartel of wealth extractors, and saying he refuses to doff his cap to powerful people. The Green Party are also launching their election campaign. That's this afternoon. Their co-leader Caroline Lucas joins me live. Parliament enters what's called the wash-up, with just a few days left to run. What legislation will get rushed through and what will be dropped? We've got the details. And Paul Nuttall's got just 6 weeks to prove himself as UKIP leader. That's according to Nigel Farage. We'll assess the party's prospects now that Brexit is underway. So all that in the next hour. With us for the duration, the Deputy Chair of UKIP, Suzanne Evans. Welcome back to the programme. Now, earlier this morning, the former UKIP leader, remember him? Yeah, he's called Nigel Farage, and he was asked if he was going to stand in the general election. I think he's done so 7 times before. This is what he had to say.
I've not made my mind up. I've got to weigh up how can I best help Brexit. Do I do it by standing for the House of Commons, or do I do it by staying as leader of a group in the European Parliament, where ultimately there's going to be a veto over the Brexit deal? I will decide over the next 2 days.
Which way are you leaning?
I'm not sure. I'm being pushed and pulled in different directions. I'm really, genuinely, at this moment in time, not sure.
There we go. He's yet to make up his mind. Would you urge him to run?
I would actually, yeah. I think he should run again in South Thanet, where he tried before. The Conservatives, according to various reports that we've had on the media, seem to behave rather badly financially in that election.
That's
There's
one
all
of the
sorts of
constituencies that's
investigations
been
going
investigated for election misspending in 2015.
Absolutely. So did the Conservatives have an unfair advantage in South Thanet? Nigel Farage missed it very, very marginally. Let's have another go.
If he did, and I'm sure he, I know he always follows your advice, as you know too, hangs on your every word, I'm told. If he does run, it's a constituency which he ran before. As you say, there's problems with it. He may think he's got a chance this time. It's close to London and the national media. Does that not then overshadow that Nigel Farage becomes the face of UKIP in this election, not Paul Nuttall?
Well, I don't think so. We're deciding about candidate selection, where we're going to stand, what are our target seats. We're going to have to do that very, very quickly. We've been doing some work already. But I would have thought that South Thanet has got to be one of those seats. So we want somebody reputable and big to be able to run there.
Should Paul Nuttall have another go at Stoke, the by-election he lost?
I think Paul, again, is thinking where it's best for him to stand. He had talked in the past about standing in Lee, Andy Burnham's seat. He's obviously standing down.
Mr Burnham, I see standing down. He's not running again.
Absolutely. So maybe Paul will feel that that's a better fit for him. Stoke was a very unusual situation, wasn't it?
What about you?
Me, I unfortunately am not going to be standing anywhere.
Why not?
Because Paul Nuttall has asked me to write the manifesto.
Well, you did it last time.
I did it last time. I did it in 4 weeks, 4 months last time. It nearly killed me. It was exhausting. Now I've got 4 weeks, so I'm afraid it's going to be head down from Monday. I won't have time to do anything else.
And it'll be shorter this time.
Well, we'll
it was a bit long last time.
Actually, do you know, it was one of the shorter manifestos. It was longer than the
It just
ones
maybe
we've had
seemed
in the
long.
past, but we had some pretty pictures in it too, Andrew, if you like that sort of
Very
thing.
well. OK. Right. Well, now we know you're writing the manifesto.
We are. I am.
Time for our daily quiz. The question for today is, which leader's child has been pictured playing football in an Arsenal shirt? I'm told that's something to do with association football. Is it Donald Trump, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, France's François Hollande, or Poland's Bita Sizdlo, or words to that effect? At the end, Suzanne will give us the answer. Don't give us now. Do you have an idea?
I think I know even less about football than you do, Andrew.
That would put you into the negative category.
Probably would.
All right, but this is really a political question in a way, but we'll come back to it. So, Jeremy Corbyn kicked off Labour's campaign this morning with a clear message. Don't write Labour off just yet. He told supporters in Westminster that while the mainstream media had written off the party's chances in the general election, he doesn't, quote, play by the rules, and that he expected to pull off a dramatic turnaround in the party's fortunes. He took aim at big business, warning the likes of Southern Railway, Philip Green and others that they should be, quote, worried about a future Labour government led by him. Let's just give you a flavour of what he had to say.
Labour is the party that will put the interests of the majority first, while the Tories only really care about those who already have so much. That is why yes, we will prove the establishment experts wrong and change the direction of this election. Because the British people know that they are the true wealth creators, held back by a system rigged for the wealth extractors. Theresa May will insist that this is an election about Brexit. She will try to downplay the issues that affect people's lives every day, and instead turn the election into an ego trip about her own failing leadership and the machinations of the coming negotiations in Brussels. It is only Labour that will focus on what kind of country we want to have after Brexit. In the coming weeks, Labour will lay out our policies to unlock opportunities for every single person in this country. We will focus on giving people real control over their own lives and make sure that everyone reaps a just reward for the work they do.
That was the Labour leader this morning. Labour's Jack Dromey joins me now. Welcome to the programme. Mr Corbyn said that there's a rigged system, rigged to favour the wealth extractors. Who are the wealth extractors?
Let me give you an example in relation to the world of work from which I came, and 30 years in the world of work. It cannot be right that the percentage of profit going on wages has fallen dramatically, but the percentage of profit going on top earners has increased dramatically. Boardroom excess.
That's a global phenomenon.
I'm all in favour of rewarding success.
Okay.
And I've worked with some damn good chief executives in my time, but it cannot be right. And understandably, what working people resent that, and what they want is a fair share.
I understand the argument. He talked about wealthy individuals and corporations, meaning companies, as wealth extractors. Give me an example of a wealth extractor.
Philip Green, for example.
That's an individual. I understand that.
Sure. Well, except that to bring alive what he is saying, what we are saying, is you need to refer to a real example.
Right.
I've met with BHS workers who work, some of them 20 and 30 years.
No, I know.
Suddenly
they lost
they've
their
been
jobs
robbed
through no
of their,
fault of their own.
robbed of their pensions.
Philip Green's an individual. He's for
Sports
Labour
Direct.
a good example. Hold on. Mr Corbyn said Philip Green should be worried by a Labour government. Why?
Bad employers, wealth extractors who treat working people shamefully, yes, they should be.
But why? What are you going to do to them?
We will be spelling out in our manifesto the issues that will be central for us at the next stage.
Well, you're going to mention Philip Green in the manifesto?
No, what we are determined to do is to ensure that the voice of working people is properly heard on the one hand.
I understand, but why should Philip Green be worried? What do you have in store for him and the boss of Sports Direct?
Wait and see what we say in our manifesto. But we're sending,
you know?
We're sending, yes, we're sending an unambiguous message, which is we want good employers to succeed.
Of course.
We're not going to allow bad employers to continue to exploit workers.
But you can't tell me yet why he should be worried.
Wait for our manifesto, Andrew.
All right. Well,
all will be revealed.
All right, let's look at some of Britain's big companies to find out how many wealth extractors there are around. Is Tesco a wealth extractor?
Tesco is a company that's done very well. Actually, the relationships between Tesco and its workforce and their trade union, Asda, is a really quite good
relationship. Is it a wealth
relationship.
extractor?
Tesco has sometimes not paid enough to the people that it employs.
So it is.
Would I equate Tesco with Sir Philip Green? Not for one moment.
No, I understand that, but you can't change the British economy the way you want to simply on the basis of Philip Green, whatever it is you have in store for him. So I'm trying to get a wider feel. Is British Telecom a wealth extractor?
British Telecom sometimes leaves something to be desired.
So,
but can we
is it a wealth extractor?
But you're not getting the point, Andrew, is that our criticism, our concern on behalf of working people is those who extract wealth wrongly and at the expense of working people and who do not treat their workforce fairly or pay them a decent living wage.
Mr. Drumley, I understand the argument. I'm trying to find out who you have in mind. I understand the argument perfectly.
I'll give you a couple of examples.
Well, let me ask, is British Gas a wealth extractor?
In my former experience in the world of work, I chaired what was called the CUPE Forum that brought together all of the employers, public and private. And what we used to have was good contractors complaining about being undercut by bad contractors. And what we stand for, therefore, Andrew, is an economy of fair treatment, but also fair competition.
You've said all that.
Good
I'm trying to find out who is in the crosshairs, because there's a lot hanging on this, and it would be good to know who you think is part of a rigged system that is a cosy cartel. So let me ask again, is Bill Gates a wealth extractor?
Bill Gates is a man who has made a fortune, but he is one of the most outstanding men in the world.
So is he a wealth extractor or not?
He has created wealth which has been spent well, not just on his employees, but also not just...
So is he not a wealth extractor?
No, hang on, not just on technological development, but also the outstanding work that he has done as a great philanthropist throughout the world.
Right. Look, I know all about Bill Gates.
You're not getting the point.
No, I am getting the point. The point is that you're not answering my question. So let me try again. It's a simple question, because Mr. Corbyn has divided the system into wealth creators and wealth extractors. And I'm asking, is Bill Gates a wealth extractor? It's a yes or no.
You're not getting the point.
I'm not getting the answer, Mr. Drummond.
No. We are in favour of the creation of wealth.
Right.
We are in favour...
So is Mr. Gates the wealth creator or the wealth extractor?
Of good employers who create wealth.
Which one is he?
What we want is an economy where you no longer get the rogues undercutting the reputable.
Is British Aerospace
a wealth extractor? Is a damn good company.
So it's not a wealth extractor?
I've worked with them over the years.
It's not a wealth extractor.
And they have created wealth on a massive basis.
Is Marks and Spencer's a wealth extractor?
Andrew, I can see what you're trying to do, but you're just missing the point. Look, let me give you this example. I remember, it wouldn't be fair to name, well, why not name it, the company ISS. This was many, many years ago, one of the biggest contractors in the world. And what they said to me was, we want to be good, we want to be better, but our problem is we operate in a competitive environment where we are undercut by the rogues. So what we want to do, therefore, is to transform the nature of the economy so that good companies create wealth and succeed, so that workers benefit as a consequence.
No, you've said that now
and so
5
that rogues
times.
No longer
So other
exploit.
than Philip Green, in your view, who else is a wealth extractor?
We've given 2 specific examples today in terms of the steps that we take at the next stages. You'll have to wait until our manifesto.
So you can't name any more, other than 2 rather high-profile, buccaneering businessmen who've had a lot of bad publicity for things they've done.
Unashamedly, those who behave badly should be named and shamed.
Right, but you can't name any more.
And that's what we'll do in future.
Let me try one more time. Who else is a wealth extractor?
Andrew, all you've got to do is to wait for our manifesto. We've sent.
So hold on. Are you going to name the wealth extractor?
We've sent the clearest possible message about the kind of economy we should be, the kind of country we should be, which works for workers and works for good employers.
That's the 6th time you've said that, without actually answering my question. So let me try another one. Do you agree with the Shadow Chancellor that anybody earning over £70,000 a year is rich?
Well, they're not poor, are they?
Well, that's not what I asked. You believe that they're rich?
The average wage is what, £26,000, £27,000 a year? To earn £70,000 a year is to live comfortably.
Well, comfortably. MPs earn over £70,000 a year. Are you rich?
Yeah, no, I was brought up in poverty.
I'm not talking about. We're all brought up in different circumstances. You earn over £70,000 a year. Are you rich?
I now get a very good wage.
I understand. I'm not arguing with that.
A very good wage.
But are you rich?
I don't certainly feel rich, no.
So why does the Shadow Chancellor say that the rich will be above 70,000?
The point he was trying to make...
That's the point he was trying to make.
The point he's trying to make is what kind of economy should we have where instead of doing what should be done, which is a fair deal for the great majority of Britain, you've got a government that has been systematically, particularly at the top, handing out tax breaks to the rich, the corporation tax, or a top rate of tax, all of the things that have made those with a lot of money yet more wealthy. But the great majority of ordinary people have lost out, not least because we've had the longest squeeze on real wages in a generation.
Let me ask you this. If 70,000 a year is a good salary. Understand
Good
that.
salary.
It's good enough for
For certain-
MPs. It's
for
good enough for
certain.
that. But it may not necessarily make you rich or make you feel that you're rich, particularly if you live in London and the South East, where you know costs are very high.
Particularly
but
housing.
if you earn 70, 80, 90,000, 100,000, at the moment your marginal rate of tax is 40%.
Yes.
These people can expect to pay a higher marginal rate of tax.
We will spell out in our manifesto our
can they or
intentions.
can't
Our
they?
intentions in relation to tax.
Well, you must be. He says that
no,
they need to pay their fair share, he said.
Our focus-
So
our-
therefore they need to pay more tax.
Our focus is not on low and middle earners. What our focus will be on, first of all, you should pay your tax because there's still too much avoidance of
Right.
tax.
But-
Secondly, if you can afford much more, then you should pay
So
more.
can people on 70,000 afford more, Mr.
You'll have to wait
Dromey?
for our manifesto. But also, thirdly, what we will do is to end the scandal of tax giveaways to the wealthy, because
Now,
that's
I
exactly
understand-
what this government has been doing.
I understand all that, but let me try one more time. If you are earning 70,000 a year, which could be the head of a big English department in a comprehensive, it could be a relatively senior policeman, it could be a doctor, it could be a very senior nurse with a lot of responsibility.
Yep.
On that, you should expect to pay a higher rate of tax.
No, and our tax plans will be and our tax plans.
They won't. So,
Our-
for these people, the marginal
our-
rate is not going up?
Our tax plans will be spelt out.
Yeah, but you've just said no.
No, our tax plans will be spelt out in the manifesto.
Is it yes or no?
Our focus, and I'm not going to.
I know what your focus is. I'm just
not going to
asking,
give
is
away.
it yes
I'm not
or
going to
no
give
for
away
these?
what we're.
There are people watching would like to know, and they may be prepared to do so.
They'd quite
Head
like- they'd
teachers,
quite like to-
JPs,
sure,
they would like to know if they're going to pay more tax.
They quite like, I suppose, you to give me the opportunity to answer the question.
You've had plenty of
is
opportunity.
Is that the focus for us will be on tackling those who avoid paying their tax, the very top-rate earners who can and should pay more, and ending,
that include
ending
people
the
on
giveaways.
70,000?
Ending the giveaways. So, for example, what we
No,
would...
no, you're not answering my question.
No, well-
we'll have to wait, I guess, for your
Until the manifesto.
because- there, but you're not going. It's a simple question and not getting it. Let me ask you this: Neil Kinnock says that it's now more unlikely than ever that there'll be a Labour government in his lifetime. Do you agree?
I am absolutely determined that we do not return to the dark days of the 1980s, where we end up with 18 years of a Conservative winter. And I fought with Neil to
I know.
rebuild
So
the
do
Labour
you
Party
agree or disagree
in the
with him?
1980s. I am absolutely determined.
I know you're
Neil-
determined, but I'm not asking if you're determined. I'm asking if you
Neil-
agree or you disagree with them.
Neil is right to say that we've got responsibility to the British people, and the British people need a Labour government, and therefore we've got to be single-mindedly focused on rebuilding support, gaining power, and changing the country for the better. A Labour Britain is always better than a Conservative Britain.
It's a very interesting and forthright answer. It just doesn't bear resemblance to the question I asked. Let me try one more thing. Mr. Corbyn said this morning that the city, he didn't use the words, but he said he was talking about the financial system, the city crashed the economy. Why, after 10 years of a Labour government, did the Labour government allow the city to crash the economy?
I think there was a global problem where governments across the globe did not sufficiently regulate the finance sector. Straight answer to a straight question.
Including the Labour government here.
Labour took a whole series of very welcome steps, interestingly opposed by George Osborne in opposition.
Let's not go through
opposed by the Tories every step of the way.
But you accept that Labour, after 10 years in power, presided over events that crashed the economy.
We took steps to try and change that. The Tories opposed all of that steps. There was then the crash.
But the economy
crashed.
crashed.
There was then the crash, and the appalling thing about what's happened subsequently, Andrew, is it's working people who paid the price.
Which
the
is
longest squeeze on real wages.
Which is a point Mr. Corbyn made strongly this morning. Jack Dromey, thank you. I hope to see you and be more successful after the manifesto.
Look forward to it.
Thank you very much. While we were talking there, we learned that Douglas Carswell has decided not to run in this election. Remember, he defected from the Tories to UKIP. He won his seat and he then left UKIP and became an independent, one of those seats in the East Coast in the Thames Estuary, which was strong UKIP territory. But he's not running again. Suzanne Evans, what's your reaction?
Well, my immediate reaction actually is perhaps rather strange, but I think Jack Dromey could look at some of the work that Douglas Carswell has actually done on how you really break apart cartel politics and how you really tackle elites and what you really do to put more money in.
I understand, but I wasn't. I was simply asking
that.
for your reaction. I'm
surprised.
You
yes,
surprised?
I'm very surprised. I always thought Douglas was somebody who was. I think he did very much enjoy his job. He was a great advocate for the people of Clacton. Whatever you think of his party political switches and changes.
Well, let me give you another surprise, or maybe it's not. He's backing the Conservative candidate.
Is he? Well, I suppose we don't know who the UKIP candidate in Clacton is yet, so I suspect that's a little bit premature.
Well, no, he knows who he's backing, but who the UKIP candidate's another matter. It never rains but it pours for UKIP at the moment, does it?
Well, it's an interesting time to be in politics, and it's a very interesting time to be in UKIP as well, but it always is.
Paul Nuttall, who's got a loose connection with the truth.
We'll have plenty of time to get there.
Political cartels.
We're done.
This is the man that's done the work, and your policies won't work.
Post-manifesto.
Look forward to it.
Me too. Theresa May has been out and about this morning. She's been in Downing Street for a series of meetings, but last night the Prime Minister was in Bolton, where she tried out some of the campaign lines we'll be hearing a lot of in the next few weeks.
Now, there's a very clear choice at this election. It's a choice between strong and stable leadership under the Conservatives or weak and unstable coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn. And that is very clear. Let's look, the other parties are lining up to prop up Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen it with the Liberal Democrats, and we see it with Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish nationalists.
Theresa May there, she was speaking in Bolton, a part of the north of Lancashire, where the Conservatives are hoping to pick up a few seats, particularly if they think the UKIP threat isn't what it was. So that's the reason why she went there. I remember in the old days, in black and white TV, it was Bolton East, Bolton West. In these days, we're always swing seats which way they went. It used to be which way the country went. These are changed days, of course, now. We're joined by David Cameron's former Deputy Chief of Staff, the Conservative MP Oliver Dowden, and by Alistair Carmichael, the Liberal Democrats Home Affairs spokesperson and the only Lib Dem MP in Scotland. Correct? Well, there you go, a distinction.
For the moment.
For the moment. We shall see if we can say the same after June the 8th. What do you make of Mr Corbyn's attempts to stand up to the wealth extractors?
Well, I mean, look, it's interesting stuff, but it's quite remarkable that in an election which is framed around Brexit, which that is clearly the defining issue, at least at the moment, Jeremy Corbyn had very little to say about it. And my instinct is that actually I think it was probably quite a good move on his part to try and shift the terms on, because on Brexit he's got a pretty weak story to tell.
Right,
he was absent without leave during the referendum campaign, and he, you know, his leadership, so-called, over Article 50 has been pitiful.
But it is not necessary, simply because the Prime Minister calls the election on a particular issue as the dominant issue. It isn't necessary for the Leader of the Opposition to have to go on with that. Mr Corbyn said this morning that the crash caused by the financial system and by the institutions of the financial system caused huge hardship for people who weren't responsible for the crash. And people are still suffering to some extent on that, and living standards and so on, whereas the people who caused it seem by and large to get away scot-free. Surely that's a legitimate point and worth campaigning on.
Of course it's a legitimate point, and it is worth campaigning on, but there is a danger for any political party that wants to talk about something other than the debate that is at the centre of it.
He wants to talk about the living standards of the British people. What could be more important?
Well, I mean, look, in that case, then it does bring us right back round to Brexit, because, yes, although Jeremy Corbyn was talking about, you know, an interesting analysis of the past, what is going to have an impact on the living standards of working people in this country in the here and now and in the future, and it will be Theresa May's determination to pursue a hard Brexit, taking us out of the single market, taking us out of the customs union.
The Ed Miliband talked about predators in his first speech, as I think it was his leader to the Labour Party conference. It was in Liverpool. I remember being there. Predators and producers. One was good, one was bad. Theresa May has talked about tax dodgers, international companies of directors who are not paying their fair share or doing things wrongly. She divided people into that as well. Mr. Corbyn's just doing the same. There's a direct line from this. There's nothing unusual about it.
Well, I think it's perfectly legitimate for Jeremy Corbyn to raise this issue, but I've always thought the way to help working people is to cut their taxes. And actually, if you look at what we've managed to do, we've cut people's taxes by £1,000 a year by increasing the personal allowance. And at the same time, actually, the wealthy are paying more than ever.
And who
the top
was it that forced
1%.
you to do that, first of all, Oliver? Can we just remember that?
Well, we found the money to do it. You can come up with many ideas. We had the plan that found the money to do
Liberal
it.
Democrat policy
It
and
was a
coalition.
Conservative policy as well. It's in our manifesto.
well.
Let me put this to you then, because it plays, it's an example. Mr. Corbyn and Mr. Dromney didn't use it, but it's an example, I think, of what they were talking about. In the financial year for Google, ending June 2016, they had a turnover in Britain of $8 billion. $8 billion. How much corporation tax did they pay?
Well, Google are paying more now than they used to. I don't know the exact figure that they paid.
All right, well, I'll tell you. 25 million.
Yeah.
So they paid 25 million on a turnover of 8 billion. That cannot be right, can it?
No, I completely agree. It's
So
not
why is it
right.
happening under this government?
We're starting to deal with this. So, for example, George Osborne introduced reforms of the rules to deal with the so-called double Irish question. The main problem we have here is that large multinational companies are moving money around the world. They're taking it as license fees, taking the tax in other countries.
No, we know
And
what they're
started
doing.
this-
What we're trying to work out is why you haven't stopped them.
Well-
This is 6 years of Conservative government, and they're still paying a marginal rate of tax on now, of course, corporation tax is on profits, but we know that you can massage profits. But a company that has made £8 billion out of this country in 1 year pays 25 million in tax. That's why people are angry, is it not?
Yes, and people are right to be
So
angry.
why have you not done so?
What we have done about it is we're tackling the double Irish question. We've raised billions in from tax avoidance. We just in this last budget we announced a further £800 million from tax avoidance. We're closing down loopholes. We're going after tax evaders with higher fines. We're more aggressively tackling tax avoidance. And I think if you look at what the Prime Minister said, if you go back to what she said on the steps of Downing Street, that is something that she wants to address further. And this is why it's so important that she gets a clear mandate at this election so that she's able to drive those reforms through.
You're writing the UK manifesto. What are you going to say about these things?
About inequality, about
Some of the various biggest companies who do well out of Britain. They're popular companies with consumers, but they seem to pay very small amounts of corporation tax.
Absolutely, and we had in our 2015 manifesto ways in which to cut down on corporate tax avoidance, which in fact the Tories actually picked up and ran with themselves, and we'll be looking into more of that too. But for us, UKIP is very much a party of low taxation. We believe fundamentally that taxpayers should be able to keep as much of their own money in their pockets as possible. So we're always looking
Even
to
if
that.
it's Google.
We're looking to smaller government as well, and I think it's one of the things that's interesting is May's government is very much a party of big government. She's talking about more politics, not less. That's something that we oppose as well. Of course, one of the big things for us too is immigration. Mass uncontrolled immigration has driven down wages. By controlling immigration, you get a natural rise in wages.
There's another dimension to all this, and neither Oliver or Suzanne are wanting to talk about it. And it's actually the truth of the matter that you will only tackle corporate tax evasion of this sort in a globalised economy by cooperating with other people in other parts of the world. The EU was one of the most significant trading blocs within that globalised economy.
Can I just? I think words have to be careful. You're not accusing Google of evasion.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about.
But that was the word you used.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Avoidance, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to put that correct. But corporate tax avoidance, closing down the loopholes, can only be done by working with other countries, and the EU is an important.
But doesn't the OECD pay the major part in this?
Well, yes, of course they do. But
that sets the global rules.
If the whole thrust of your politics is, as it is now being driven, by Suzanne and her colleagues, an inward-looking and isolationist
Oh,
politics,
rubbish. Come on, we're
then
global
in fact
our
that
vision. This is
becomes
nonsense.
more
You're
and more
completely spinning
difficult.
everything.
And can I just challenge you on the EU? Actually, I think the central role is played not only by the OECD but the G7. And again, we've made tremendous progress through the G7 looking at tackling tax avoidance. I don't think
But
the
still
EU
it's happening,
has that
Oliver.
big a role to play on tax
The EU
avoidance.
actually helps facilitate it by being members of the European Union. Companies can decide to base their headquarters in countries that have the lowest tax regimes. We would stop that.
What would the Lib Dems do about inequality?
But inequality, we tackle it, as Oliver suggested there, by starting with allowing working people to keep more money in...
But a lot of that's been done already.
Well, a lot of it has been done, but there's still a lot more to do. And actually what you do then is you use the machinery of government to give people the tools to pull themselves up. So we invest in education, we invest in the pupil premium, which puts direct money, extra money directly into children who come from the poorer families. That way you enable them to make the most of the talents that they have got and to pull themselves out of poverty.
You up for a progressive alliance?
Well, if there are progressives around with whom you can make an alliance, then I'm up for it.
Mr.
But frankly,
Corbyn?
I'm not seeing it. I don't think there's much that we could have an alliance with as far as Jeremy Corbyn's concerned, because there's any alliance has got to be a coherent one, and no alliance with Jeremy Corbyn is going to be coherent. As for the nationalists, as you well know, they are neither progressive nor are they particularly keen on making alliances with other people. That's just a little bit of mischief making from the SNP there, I think.
It is, okay, and not from yourself.
Oh, no, heaven forfend.
We'll leave it
You know
there
me better
before there's
than
any
that.
more mischief. Thank you very much. So, what I hear you cry loudly out there about all the bills that are going through Parliament at the moment. What about the small and medium-sized cooperative development bill? Yeah, that's kept you awake. And the short and holiday let accommodation bill. Well, let me tell you all about the wash-up period. Pay attention, you can take notes. The wash-up is the period immediately before an election when the government works out which bills it can rush through and which it has to drop before Parliament dissolves at the start of May. Turning bills into law is normally a long, drawn-out process that can take months, but during the wash-up, the government speeds up the process by watering bills down to take the controversial bits out and thrashes out compromises with the opposition parties so the bills can get through. Anything left over has to wait until a new government is formed, which won't be till after the election in June. Let's talk now to our reporter, Emma Vardy. Emma, what's getting through and what isn't, do we think?
Well, there's hundreds of bills going through Parliament at the moment. Some of them cover mainstream issues like prisons and bus services. Others deal with the more obscure things like bat habitat regulations, for example. Now, there's 6 major ones which have reached the ping-pong stage, where they're going back and forth between the houses. The Higher Education and Research Bill is one of the big ones at this stage, and this will only get onto the statute book if concessions are being made. Now, Theresa May, it appears, is already having to compromise on things like taking foreign student numbers out of immigration totals. So this is where the opposition really have the whip hand at the moment because they can shut things down that the government really wants to get through. Now, the Digital Economy Bill, that deals with ticket touting and the level of the BBC licence fee. It's another one at ping-pong stage that will be able to get through if concessions are made. Now, there's other bills that haven't reached ping-pong yet. The Criminal Finances Bill is a major one. That deals with corrupt wealth and terrorist financing. That's back in the Lords next week and will still be able to get through if parties agree. For others, though, well, it looks like it's the end of the road. The Prisons and Courts Bill and the Local Government Finance Bill, they're two which look like they'll bite the dust and will have to be restarted next Parliament.
I mean, the Tories, Emma, think they're going to win this election, otherwise they wouldn't have called it, and they think they're going to win big. They may be right or may be wrong, but that's what they think. So why do they need to rush some of this through if they're confident they're going to come back? Can they not just pick up from where they left off?
Well, some things are time critical, like getting permission for university fees to rise in time for September. But what's also important is that for bills, even if they're almost fully formed, if they have to go through all the faff of being restarted next Parliament, well, then they're also going to be fighting for space with Brexit legislation. Now, a lot of the negotiations for this will go on behind the scenes over 4 days next week. There will be pressure for the government to get things through, but also the opposition don't want to be seen to be standing in the way of useful legislation just because of a point of detail. So we've got this wash-up period for 4 days next week, and we'll watch and see what happens.
All right, Emma, thank you very much for that. The wash-up period, it is part of the way the British do things in the approach of an election. We're joined now by Catherine Haddon from the Institute for Government. Welcome to the programme. Is this a period where there is actually quite a lot of cooperation between the parties to get this done?
Yeah, there can be. And it's not just between the parties. I mean, the big division is actually between the Commons and the Lords, because that is in the House of Lords is where the opposition really sits, because obviously there's a majority in the Commons. So it's more about between the two chambers. And it's not just about differences of view and things like that. Actually, there's a lot of important scrutiny and amendments go on in these kind of stages. So governments themselves, when they put legislation through, will often put lots of amendments onto things because they realise it didn't quite work. So the danger of doing it too rapidly is you end up with a bad bill, and that's what they also want to avoid.
I suppose it's a time when the opposition does have more power than it normally has, and the Lords will have more power than they normally have.
I mean, a classic example was 1983, when we were awaiting a BT privatisation bill to come through, and Labour refused to put it through in the rush before the 83 election. So it had to wait. Obviously, Margaret Thatcher was returned, brought the bill back in. So there is an opportunity, and higher education and the research funding bill, that's one where we may see a lot of opposition from the Lords, because there's been a lot of criticism about it.
And it's interesting that there's been some stories, I think, in the press this morning that Mrs May, who's argued against taking student numbers out of the migrant figures, may now concede that to get the bill through.
Well, and there's a lot of interesting questions, not just how much legislation will be on the books for the next Parliament and whether or not they want to carry bills through, but also what does May want to change? Because many of these bills have their origins in the last Conservative manifesto. So we could be seeing that this is her opportunity also to sort of change policy on a number of issues. You know, should she be returned with the majority that she hopes for?
And I guess that's one of the reasons that she's giving for the election, that if she puts a number of things into the manifesto, then under, I think it's called the Salisbury Rule, the Lords then can't, they can delay it, they can argue a bit about it, but then they cannot stop something on which a government has been elected in its manifesto.
Although, I mean, the Lib Dems don't recognise the doctrine of
they don't.
Salisbury. No, they rejected it back in 2005. I don't know whether under Tim Farron they'll respect it. But yes, this is a long-standing tradition that things that are in the manifesto, but obviously in the manifesto they're not necessarily specified, they're not that much detail, so there's still a lot of scope for opposition, but it means that key areas that have been put through as manifesto policies, the Lords are not supposed to be able to wreck them, they're not supposed to be ultimately able to stop them, but they can change them significantly if they argue the case.
We don't know yet, and I guess we'll have to wait for the Tory manifesto to work out if Mrs May has got a major legislative programme in mind in addition to Brexit, or whether Brexit's going to suck up all the oxygen in the parliamentary estate.
I mean, when she first became Prime Minister, obviously her speech was a lot about domestic policy. And there are a number of areas where we've seen progress, but that will now have to stall. I mean, we were expecting sort of more consultations, more from the government on industrial strategy, on social mobility. And of course, there was going to be a white paper on grammar schools out in June. These could all change, but then there's other things that might change as well. I mean, we saw obviously with the budget, the finance bill is one of the things that is currently needs to be sorted out and go through the wash-up period.
Because that's tax and revenues and involved in spending, so they've got to do that.
I mean, they'll probably reduce it back to the bare minimum, but they may want to have a new budget. Obviously, under the next government, they may want to reintroduce this thorny issue of national insurance hike. Because
if they run on a different manifesto than the last time.
The Treasury have now got this big hole that they want to fill, so the manifesto could change the legislation a lot.
Parliament gets prorogued or goes down, I think, at midnight on May the 2nd, or a minute after midnight on May the 3rd. Is that right?
Yeah, dissolution. It could be prorogued earlier. That's just suspension. That happens at the
So then they don't meet, but the dissolution.
But the dissolution, it's been announced this morning that it will be, at the end of the 2nd of May. So that will also be the last time that MPs and their staffs get to access computers.
And they're not MPs anymore.
They're not MPs anymore. They are just candidates. So they won't have access to all those resources either. And the Civil Service have written to MPs today to say that the sort of normal process where they write for inquiries won't be happening. As far as the Civil Service are concerned, some of PERDA has already started.
And the election's on the 8th of June, and then a couple of weeks afterwards, whoever wins has formed the government, and there's the Queen's speech.
Yeah, so we were expecting a Queen's speech anyway in May. So there's not as much legislation going on now because of that, but we would have been expecting a whole new raft of things anyway. But yes, you've got to take into account the fact also she might have a reshuffle. If she comes back with a large majority, she might want to change departments around. So that will also affect what kind of legislation, smaller legislation going through as well, because different ministers may have different sort of priorities in mind.
OK, fascinating, Catherine Haddon. Thank you very much. Now, our guest of the day is Suzanne Evans of UKIP, writer of the 2015 and now the 2017 UKIP manifesto. At every election, we're used to hearing that her party is on the verge of a parliamentary breakthrough. Of course, it's still yet to happen. Could this be their moment? Party's had some success, currently holding 5 seats in the Welsh Assembly. But UKIP has also faced an array of problems, most of them self-inflicted. After last year's referendum, MEP Diane James was elected as leader, but she stood down after only 18 days, saying she didn't have the support of her colleagues. Eventually, she resigned from the party altogether. Cue another leadership race and another resignation. This time, frontrunner Stephen Woolfe left the party after he was left unconscious during an altercation with a fellow UKIP MEP. MEP Paul Nuttall was eventually elected as UKIP Supremo, but was then caught out about achievements on his CV and had to apologise after falsely claiming he had lost close friends in the Hillsborough disaster, all of which helped scupper his campaign in the Stoke by-election. He was described as weak by the party's millionaire donor Aaron Banks, before Mr. Banks was subsequently elbowed out during a row about his membership status. He vowed to set up UKIP 2.0 and, quote, destroy the party. And the troubles kept coming. Their only MP, Douglas Carswell, then resigned from the party to sit as an independent, though many in UKIP weren't sorry to see him go. And this month, former Tory Mark Reckless, he's now a Welsh Assembly member, he resigned from UKIP to sit as independent, but vote with the Conservative group in the Senedd, the Welsh Assembly. So, what a mess.
Thank you for reminding me of all that. I'd have completely forgotten if it wasn't for you telling me, Andrew.
It's a kind of just never-ending nightmare, isn't it?
Well, it's not been our moments of glory, has it really? Let's be honest. But, you know, I think we're in a situation now where Article 50 has been triggered. There's no doubt that getting out of the European Union was UKIP's reason for being. That was our primary goal. Inevitably, I think there's going to be a period of reflection and reconsideration when it looks like somebody else has picked up that ball and run away with it. But what I'd say to people is we're not out yet. And those people who are saying that UKIP is finished, UKIP's job is done, I'd say, well, no, until the fat lady sings on Brexit, if you like, we are still in, we still have to get out.
Right.
There's still this debate about hard, soft Brexit. I'd say there is just Brexit.
Right. But, I mean, people like you and many other UKIP people always tell me in these sort of interviews that your job is to hold the government's feet to the fire over Brexit.
Well, I think it is.
You see your role.
Yes.
But when you've just seen that litany of woes I've gone through, you've done more to set yourselves alight.
Well, I, in some senses, I can only agree with you. You know, we have, in some senses, I think, shot ourselves in the foot. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a job to do and that we mustn't do our best to carry on doing that job.
But I wonder if there is a role now, because Mrs May is going to go to the country and she will repeat her Brexit strategy and the broad outlines of what she aims to achieve in the negotiations. And if she wins, she will have a mandate to carry that out. Whether you like all the details or not, she has the mandate, if she wins, to do it. So I think even your role of holding their feet to the fire seems to have been scuppered by this election.
Well, I disagree. I mean, my concerns about if Theresa May comes back with a massive Tory majority, my concern is that when you have huge majorities in government without any serious opposition, a sort of dictator mentality comes in. And I think there's a touch of that in Mrs May. You know, we're hearing she's not going to take part in the television debates. It's like, well, I'm just going to do what I like.
She's
anyway,
a dictator.
Carry on. I didn't say that. I said perhaps
you said
that's
a touch of a dictator.
A touch of a dictator.
Well.
Like we had Tony Blair in 97. You know, massive Labour majority, Tory party completely depleted, decisions made without any real opposition that scuppered and left a terrible legacy for people for successive generations. I'm not terribly keen on big majority governments precisely for that reason.
But if you had, just for the sake of argument, let's accept just briefly the elected dictatorship argument, if you were to have any role in putting some constraints on this self-described elective dictatorship, you would need more than 1 or 2 MPs, otherwise you'd be irrelevant.
Well, I know this is what people tell me all the time, but you know, before we had any MPs, we were extremely relevant. We managed to get a referendum on the table.
On that issue.
And others too, Andrew. It's quite
But
funny.
if you're not in Parliament, you can't hold the government to account.
Well, one of the things that we'll be looking at in our 2017 manifesto is all those policies that UKIP put forward in our manifesto, that or the Tory handbook, as some people are calling it, that the Conservative Party has now gone with. I think we still...
So you're even more irrelevant then if they've nicked your policies.
Depends how you define relevance, isn't it?
Well, if they've nicked your policies, even your non-EU policies are now being pinched by them.
I'd say actually that makes us very relevant if we can put forward ideas that other parties are prepared to run with.
But why vote for the monkey when you can have the organ grinder?
Because you don't know that the organ grinder is actually going to play the tune that they say they would have played.
But she will have a mandate to do so, as I say, if she wins.
I hope so.
If she gets it, then in a sense what you think doesn't matter anymore, because the government will be able to say if it's re-elected and if it wins with a big majority as well. If it's a small win, then all sort of things will happen. But she then has a mandate, and what you think is surely irrelevant.
Let's see what the Tory manifesto says. You know, it's all very well to say you're going to control immigration, but Theresa May failed to do that when she was Home Secretary. Never came anywhere near the tens of thousands, just went up and up and up, including non-EU immigration over which she had control. She said she wants to release us from the European Courts of Justice. Does that mean we're going to pull out of the European arrest warrant, or are we still going to have people imprisoned overseas without trial? I'd like to see the details of what she comes up with.
But the failure of the government to hit its immigration figures has been apparent now for 6 years. We're probably into the 7th. The issue of the European arrest warrant has been around for at least 6 more years as well. And yet you've made all these points and you still have no MPs. I mean, you're not getting anywhere.
Well, let's wait and see, shall we?
We're always waiting and seeing and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And when you get an MP, they either leave or they defect to become independent, or in the case of Mr. Carswell this morning, they decide not to stand again.
Stand again, yeah. Well, maybe Douglas was clearly thinking about that anyway, I'd suggest. But just because we don't have any MPs is not going to stop us trying, Andrew.
I understand that, and many parties all over the world have to try. They don't
of course.
have MPs, or only 1 or 2. Mr. Nuttall talked about rebranding the party. What does that mean?
I don't know. I think a lot of people talk about rebranding.
You are writing
UKIP.
the manifesto, you told me.
Yeah, but that's not a rebrand, is it?
Well, except
It's
the content of the manifesto should surely reflect
I see what you mean. I think he was talking about rebranding logo, that sort of thing.
Or get rid of the Union flag?
That's not going... Well, the pound sign is our current
logo. The pound sign, sorry.
I like the pound sign very much. I hope we don't get rid of it. I don't like the yellow. I like the purple. Sorry, I'm sounding very girly now, but you know, I think that
sounds like you are doing a bit of rebrand.
What we're doing in September.
I guess the issue is UKIP began as something of a threat to the Tories in the South, and I think that was one of the reasons why Mr. Cameron did move to a referendum. It then started to think we could be even more of a threat to Labour in the North, without ceasing to be a threat in the South. But when you look at the South now, and look at Mrs. May's position and the fact that the country did vote for Brexit and that she's taking a line that so far you by and large approve of,
well, on that one issue.
In the Brexit
That one issue, yeah.
Disaffected Tory voters who went to you are probably almost certainly just going to go back to the Tories in the south, and the Stoke by-election showed that you're not really getting the Labour votes in the north.
Well, I think we can. I remember the very first interview I ever did for Daily Politics when everyone was saying that UKIP was only hoovering up the Tory vote. I said, actually, I disagree. I think our future lies in those Labour heartlands. Personally, I think we need to focus on both. And my manifesto will once again, UKIP's manifesto will once again look to be both. It will be that common sense party that appeals to both those on the left and the right, because it is common sense, because it's policies that will benefit everyone in the country.
You said there was a touch of the dictator about Mrs May, but weren't you the one last November that wanted judges to be sacked?
No, I didn't want judges to be
sacked.
sacked.
Yes, you did.
No, I've been terribly misquoted on this. What I was talking about is about the fact that our judiciary is pretty much completely unaccountable, and I think there should be much more scrutiny when it comes to judicial appointments, for instance. We've been talking earlier in the programme about the elites, and the elites kind of replicate themselves, and there's perhaps nowhere that's more evident than in the judiciary.
So that sacking judges won't be in the manifesto?
Absolutely will not be in the manifesto, I can guarantee that, no.
There you go, you heard it here first. Now, it's not just Labour who are kick-starting their election campaign today. The Green Party of England and Wales, we should say, there's a separate one for Scotland, are launching what they're calling their boldest campaign ever. This afternoon it's in Bristol. We're joined from the glorious Bristol area there by the party's co-leader Caroline Lucas. And there she is with that iconic bridge behind her. You must have heard or seen bits of what Mr Corbyn was saying this morning. Was there anything you disagreed with?
Well, I've actually been on a train for most of the morning, with plenty of delays, so if you wouldn't mind refreshing my memory about what he did say.
Oh, well,
really
I mean,
helpful.
I can't obviously not go through it all, but he talked about wealth extractors, he talked about cosy cartels of people making the rules up to help themselves. He talked about, Mr McDonald has talked about raising taxes on those over 70,000 a year. It was a pretty standard left-wing agenda, and I just wondered if you disagreed with any of it.
The general thrust.
Yeah.
Certainly I do agree on saying that we need to be moving to a much fairer society. We in Britain have one of the most unequal societies in the whole of Europe. So yes, to that extent, certainly we would want to be making sure that those people on higher incomes are going to be paying more. But I think what's distinctive about the Green Party is not only do we have that analysis and that shared concern about inequality and a real commitment to address inequality, but also we've got that consistent position when it comes to Brexit, unlike Labour. So on Brexit, we're very clear we want to avoid the hardest type of Brexit which Mrs May is pursuing, for which we say she has no mandate. And thirdly, of course, we want to make sure that climate, environmental protection is back up there on the top of the agenda. It really is quite extraordinary how slow people's memories are, how short people's memories are. You know, it wasn't that long ago when people were deeply concerned that last year was the hottest year on record. They seem to have forgotten that now. So we're going to be talking about the importance of investing in green jobs, nowhere more so than here in Bristol, where we're currently in second place. Molly Scott-Cato, our candidate, was currently an MEP, a very experienced politician. And we had last time round an increase from 4% in 2015 up to 27%. Now that is, you know, almost unprecedented in the history of British polling. So we've got a really good chance of winning our first MP here in Bristol West.
You've reached out to Labour and the Lib Dems with talk of a progressive alliance, but they've both rejected your offer. Are you disappointed by that?
I'm deeply disappointed, and people up and down the country, I think, are disappointed because it's yet more of the same kind of politics that puts their own political self-interest above the interests of the country. And I think right now we do face a defining general election, one that absolutely will make key decisions about what kind of country they were going to be. And if we're not very careful, a quick look at the polls suggests that the kind of policies that Mrs May is pursuing are going to ensure that she comes back with maybe a majority of up to 100. I don't think that actually represents what people want in this country. I think it's a result of a very skewed electoral system, which right now
because we don't know it's a result yet.
You know, complete control on. Well, can I just say that right now this government is governing on the basis of less than 24% of the eligible voting for them. So we have a skewed electoral system. That's why we need to be reaching out to other parties to see if we can do our best to avoid the most extreme kind of Tory policies which Theresa May stands for.
Now, you set an interesting precedent, your party in Richmond, in the Richmond by-election, famously won by the Lib Dems, because you stood down And I'm sure that helped to contribute to the Lib Dem victory there. Will the Green Party, which you've got to concentrate your resources in the areas like where you are now in Bristol, which is fertile territory for you, will you be looking at seats where you, even though they've rejected your Progressive Alliance formally, you'll look at seats where you can say, well, if we don't stand there, another Progressive would have a better chance of winning, so we won't?
Well, I think certainly we would want to see some degree of reciprocity. So what you're not going to see is Green Party people standing down across the country, and you wouldn't expect that. But what I think is exciting, notwithstanding what Jeremy said yesterday, is the fact that up and down the country there is such a desire to try to beat this such a scandalously undemocratic electoral system and to work together to that end. And so many times you have parties from the centre and centre-left fighting each other, and what happens time and again is that the Tories sail through the middle. Surely now, at this critical juncture, when there is so much at stake, when it comes to our public services, when it comes to Brexit, surely now those other parties should be putting aside tribal politics and doing what's best for the country.
I understand the logic, Caroline Lucas. There are 5 Conservative seats which the Lib Dems would have won if Green voters had backed them in the 2015 election. But as you say, it has to be a two-way street, or there's not much in it for you, I guess. But are you having any discussions with Tim Farron or Liberal Democrats about that sort of thing?
But there are discussions going on at all levels, and when you say there's not much in it for us, can I just draw your attention also to somewhere like the Isle of Wight, another of our target seats, which currently is held by a Conservative. You've got UKIP in second place, but Greens are third. They're ahead of both the Lib Dems and Labour. We've got a fantastic candidate on the Isle of Wight, Vix Lothian. She is really admired and respected. She has a very good chance if they were to do something that would be helpful to us.
That's interesting.
So there's a real groundswell of people who want to change this.
So do you think? I understand, and it's because as you say, British politics also always very tribal, that this doesn't happen. Is there a real possibility that in some of the seats with the Lib Dems, where the Lib Dems could win if you weren't there, or where you could win if the Lib Dems weren't there, is that a discussion that we should be looking out for in the next couple of weeks? Is it really a runner?
I think it is a runner because there is such a groundswell of popular opinion for it. My email box is overflowing with people begging for the parties to get together and have some grown-up politics. You've got organisations like Compass, you've got this new organisation by Gina Miller, you've got all kinds of people active in this space saying, how do we have a politics that actually delivers what the majority of people in this country want? And the irony is that our undemocratic electoral system, which gives absolute power to a government on less than 24% of the eligible vote, that is something that is stymieing what the majority of people in this country want, which is decent public services, investment in jobs, investment in the environment.
Except when they had a chance to vote for a change of the electoral system, they didn't take it. But let me just clarify.
Well,
again.
No, if you're going to change it to something that's not much better,
that's fine. That's your view. But they decided not to.
Them.
It could have been the first stage to something what you would regard as better, but they wouldn't even go that way. But if, with discussions with Labour or the Lib Dems, if it's possible to identify, say, 5 seats where if you step back they could do better, maybe win, or 5 seats where if they step back you would do better, you're up for that?
Completely up for that. And I think this idea of stepping back can take many forms. It can be anything as simple as where you decide to put resources, so you're still fielding paper candidates, right through to, one could even perhaps imagine in some place where perhaps enough trust exists to have a kind of an open primary where there's an open democratic decision about who is best placed to fight an extreme Tory. But I think the key thing to say is that this is locally driven. It has to come from what the local people in the local constituencies want, and with public meetings up and down the country, those discussions are being had right now. All right,
Caroline Lucas, thank you for joining us there with such a beautiful backdrop. It's been a pleasure.
Come and join us.
If only I had the time, Caroline Lucas said, come and join us, if only. Does that appeal to you? Some sort of politics?
Well, obviously we're completely with the Greens when it comes to electoral reform. We don't like the current electoral system. We believe in a system of proportional representation that does actually make votes matter and makes votes fair.
All right, we'll have to leave it there as these era of good feelings break out, as they once called it in American history after the Revolution. There's just time before we go to find out the answer to our quiz. The question was, which leader's child has been pictured playing football in an Arsenal shirt? Was it child of Donald Trump, of North Korea's Kim Jong-un, of Francois Hollande, the outgoing French president, or Poland's, let me see if I can get this right, Beata Szydło. What's the...
Oh my goodness. Oh look, 25% shot. The Polish.
No, it's not the Polish. It's Donald Trump, I think.
Donald Trump?
His son.
Right.
Yeah, it was Donald Trump's son was caught in an Arsenal shirt. There we go.
It's revolutionised my
Thanks
life.
to Suzanne Evans. I'll be back this evening at 11:45 on BBC One. I'll be joined again by Suzanne, Miranda Green, Anne Widdecombe, Chuka Umunna, Gina Miller, Giles Brandreth, and Big Nasty. No, I've no idea who he is either. Bye.